Hi, okay. You can see me, you can hear me. Let's do this. Hi everyone, I'm Hanyu or Alice, and I'm going to be talking to you about designing the persistence length of magnetic polymers. And if you're anything like me, you've been staring at these two videos. These are two actual videos of our raw experimental data for this project. And my goal for the project has been to 1, quantify the behavior of these two videos, 2, understand the theoretical framework, and 3, be able to design and tune the flexibility of these chains at will. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. A longstanding vision for our group has been to design and develop microscopic machines with functions comparable to biological macromolecules. And when we look to biology, we see DNA base pairs coming together to form DNA and RNA, and amino acids coming together to form polypeptide chains and enzymes. These are all nature's examples of polymers, which, as one of the key classes of solids, polymers have properties that are simply not found in any other material and offer us a unique design space for our microscopic machines. And a key property of polymers is its persistence length, which is simply just the flexibility or rigidity of such a polymeric chain. So a higher persistence length simply means a stiffer chain. And we would like to be able to tune this persistence length. Well, drawing inspiration from polymer science, we can tune the persistence length by changing the angle potential between adjacent bonds, changing the bond strength between adjacent atoms, or drawing inspiration from the DNA microfluidics community. We can add some sort of external field to gain external control of our systems, which are these chains of magnetic polymers. So I hand assembled a chain of magnetic panels, which consist of a cap, a body, and a base. The cap shape can be flat, hemispherical, or other shapes, and offer us a way to change the panel-to-panel contact surface. For the body, we're currently using a 2x2 square array of magnets, and here are the 4 unique dipole patterns for such a setup. And depending on exactly what our system is, I sometimes glue a base onto the bottom of these systems to achieve more desirable persistence length behaviors. So the idea here is that we can mix and match between the cap, the body, and whether or not we want a base to get all sorts of persistence length behaviors. Going back to the polymer analogy, changing the cap shape would be equivalent to changing the angle potential, and changing the body dipole pattern would be equivalent to changing the bond strength. So now that we have this chain of polymers, I then put this chain into a shaker bowl and I agitate the chain with the shaker while the camera films the chain's reaction from above. And these are the 2 videos I had on the title slide, which actually show more or less the 2 extremes experimentally. After these videos are collected, I then run the videos through some code that picks out the angles for every few frames, and these angles are fitted to the persistence length equation. And this gives us a persistence length reading for each video. So now that we're all on the same page when it comes to the experimental setup and analysis procedure, I wanted to show you guys some of our raw data, some of our data. Well, first off, for the data for changing the angle potential. And for our systems, that would mean changing the cap shape. To control our variables, we decided to use the black dipole pattern for the body. So our final systems look something like this. And when you take a look at the experimental data for this system, you can immediately notice a jump between the persistence length of the flat systems and the persistence length of hemispherical systems. The black flats are just much stiffer than the black hemispherical systems for all shaker accelerations. And to be able to further understand this, we need to think harder about the systems and dive into some theory. Starting with 2 adjacent panels, we can calculate the amount of amount of energy it takes to bend them by a given angle theta. We can also plug theta into the aforementioned persistence length equation to get a predicted persistence length reading. This is handy now because if I plot the bending energy on the x-axis, that offers us a correlation to the shaker acceleration, since the shaker is what provides the energy into the systems in the first place. And plotting a predicted persistence length on the y-axis just offers us a direct comparison with experiment. And that is what I have done here. You can see immediately too from the theoretical calculations, the black flats and the black hemispheres immediately show a jump. So now that we have this calculation, we started wondering if we can get a system that jumps between the two. So maybe something that looks like this. Well, this curve is the exact curve for a dotted system. And when we look at the experimental data, you might be able to convince yourself that the dotted system starts to peel away from the hemispherical system at the highest Shaker accelerations. This system just appears to start the transition right before the shaker has too much energy and breaks the chain. However, we do also have experimental confirmation that the dotted system can indeed follow the flats. Here is a system where the jump happens much sooner. And from experimental results, the jump appears to have happened at the lowest shaker accelerations, where none of the chains are able to overcome the friction of the shaker. So now that I've told you guys the story about changing the angle potentials, I wanted to chat briefly about changing the bond strength. And a trivial thing to do here would be to simply change the panel-to-panel magnetic interaction strength. And I do in fact have experimental data that shows that we can in fact do this. But for the purposes of this talk, I wanted to show you guys something a little more interesting. We wanted to look at changing the body dipole pattern. However, experimentally, we saw early on that the blue and red systems broke very fast. And so to be able to push these systems out to a shaker acceleration where we can get good data, we decided to leave off the base. In addition, in order to try to see a wider range of persistence length behaviors, we decided to use the hemispherical caps. So our systems look something like this. However, when we took a look at the theoretical calculations for this, we were a bit disappointed to see that the energies came out pretty similar to each other. And experimentally, it's the same story. But now that we have found such a system, we started wondering if we could selectively change the persistence length of some systems and not others. For this, we can't really just apply any sort of external field, but one in particular should work, an external magnetic field. This is currently being done in the lab by putting two big magnets on either side of the shaker. And our idea is that the black and green systems should behave very differently from the red and blue systems. Since the black and green systems have a net moment, they will interact with the external magnetic field, and therefore their persistence length should be affected. Whereas the red and blue systems do not have a net moment, and so none of the other things should follow. And we do in fact see this. Even before looking at the persistence length data, you can see that the black and green systems tend to rotate to align with the field, and so therefore are influenced by the field, whereas the red and blue systems don't appear to be affected by the field at all. And when we take a look at the persistence length data, more data is needed to see for sure, but you can see that the black and green data points with an external field appear to deviate away from the black and green data points without an external field, whereas the red and blue data points show no such change. And that's it. I've told you guys the 3 ways we're currently using to explore to be able to tune the persistence length of these systems. By now, though, you may be wondering, well, this is great and all, but what's the point? Well, for one, they're fun to play with, but more importantly and more practically, now that we are starting to gain an intuition and understanding of these systems on the macro scale, we can and have in fact succeeded in making these magnets tiny. A few months ago, by making use of different dipole sizes, we were able to write dipoles with opposite moments on the same substrate. This should, in theory now, allow us to make these sub-micron multi-domain magnetic colloidal particles. In addition, since the laws of magnetism are scale invariant, we should be able to apply the theories we have developed for our macroscopic models on our microscopic systems. And with that, I'd like to thank Chrissy for providing the theoretical calculations and presented in this talk, and Tanner for heading up the microscopic manufacturing, and everyone else in Michael Pollan and Nitai's groups. And thank you for listening.